Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's October 1, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Also want to thank Carolyn Casey for introducing me to today's guest, Eiren Caffall. Is that right, Eiren?
Caffall, like Caffall.
Caffall. Where are you calling from, Eiren?
I'm calling from Chicago.
How cool is that? First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Whoa. What is the best thing for a human being? I think the best thing for a human being is to stay open.
Wow. That is really, go ahead.
No, I think that there is so much possible variety in what the experience of being born a human can bring to you. And I think that it's maybe just my connection to the Rilke poem of like keeping open, staying open to everything at all times, that you can't predict what's going to be the life you're going to be given, the body you're going to be given, the history, the moment you're going to be arriving on Earth. And the more openness you have, the more curiosity, the better the experience of being a human being, I think.
It's beautiful. I really resonate with that. It's really articulate. To stay open. You're concise and articulate. And I appreciate that. So what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
That's a really good question. I love listening to people's voices. So I listen to a lot of recorded books and podcasts, and I love film and music, and was a musician before, or in between periods of being a writer. So I think that if I was going to only have one medium in which to receive information, it would be someone speaking it to me, reading a book to me aloud, or talking to me about what they understand. So the medium is the human voice, I'd say.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Because I think we're trying to respond to that question of what it is that comes through when we're open, right? So when you're open to experience in the world and when you're curious, there's a lot of information and a lot of input that needs to be parsed and understood and explained and felt through. And I think that we gather information in order to make sense of the experiential nature of human life. There's just too much data that comes in through an open portal like that into your consciousness, and you need information in order to be able to regulate and organize it.
Beautiful. You're a language crafter indeed. So do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Oh, I think it's innate.
Yeah.
I think all you have to do is parent a child to be able to, or just hang out with a kid to be able to recognize that, like, that's just an inborn thing. Children are constantly looking for information and collecting it, collecting objects, collecting data, interacting with the world, making a map for themselves, an internal map that helps them understand what it is they've been born into. And I think we just have, over the millennia, refined what that looks like, or maybe not even refined. I think we've just altered it. I think we've had moments before now where we've been much more able to understand certain types of data that we're closed off to at this moment in time. And I think, that will be ongoing throughout human history. What we allow, what we collect, what it looks like, how we value it is a pretty changeable thing in human life. But the instinct feels like one of the most human things we do.
Do thoughts create emotions?
I don't know that I have an answer for that. I think that as a person who spends a lot of time in the world of thought, right? I'm a writer, so I'm constantly thinking about plot, and I'm constantly thinking about data, and I'm also a researcher and somebody who spends a lot of time listening to scientists and kind of parsing through understanding and how we describe it. Accessing emotional life can be a little bit more tricky for me as a person and as a writer. But I think that there are two simultaneously operating streams of information that you have access to. And depending on what your temperament is or what the moment allows for you, I think dipping into them or combining them is really situational, for me at least. When I can move past the cerebral approach I'm taking to a problem, to an understanding, to a piece of writing, and how I can begin to access emotional life, or how I can then use my intellectual capacity to analyze and understand why I've had a particular emotional reaction to something. I feel like they're very much like two rivers that are like running side by side in my consciousness that I need to access in different ways at different times, not necessarily one giving birth to the other.
Really good. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
I mean, it's a cliche for writers, so maybe you've had this answer before, but I think for so many of us who write or who make art of any kind, like, I don't really know what I think until I've processed it through my artistic capabilities. And I think one of the things that happens for me is that if I go long periods of time without writing, what I tend to notice is that I feel very at sea internally, and I'm not really sure what my take is on the moment in which I find myself in my own life, in the geopolitical life of the world, in nature, whatever it is that I'm trying to engage with. If I haven't had a period of that day where I've been able to process through writing, then I'm not really sure what it is that I think or feel. And so, I didn't really know what I thought about my genetic kidney disease until I wrote a whole book about it. And then at the other side of that book, I really knew what I thought about it. I knew what I thought about it from every angle. I had really processed the emotional life of the diagnosis and the upbringing that I had with it. And without that book, I think I would have existed and had opinions about my own body and my own illness. I would have had, emotions about it, but I don't know that I really would have understood what I thought about it. And my writing process for the novel is very much the same. I needed to process what I thought about climate collapse, and could only do it, to the tune of 90,000 words.
Well, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. I like that you added the word process through the act of writing. Very good. Can humans think without language?
Oh, yeah, I think we can think without language. I think that we could think with musical forms and with ideas and with experiences and the information we get from our senses. I don't think we need language in order to do it. I think it's wonderful that we have it.
Yeah. Chomsky says language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
Yes.
Eiren, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I have this really lucky life experience of having been a musician for 10 years. And so I think for me, the reason that I gravitated towards making music was that sometimes language does break down, especially for me around the emotional side of my work. If I'm having trouble processing through language, if language falls apart, what I feel like I end up going back to is the way that music allows my intellect and my emotional life to move through that same kind of process, that it can access things that if language isn't helping me reach it, music will.
Yeah, that's the great Walter Pater quote. All art aspires to the condition of music, like poetry, literature, architecture, painting. They all wish they could be as cool as music.
They all wish they could be as cool as music. And I think, there's nothing better than allowing yourself to experience what it is to be a musician, either, at whatever level that you engage with it at. It's a gift to be able to access those unconscious pieces of you that can only flourish with music.
Beautiful. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think we're more feeling beings.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I think our emotional lives are the richest part of us, and that we then take those emotional lives and try to run them through information gathering and thought processes and history and literature and language and, all of the things that we've collected in terms of, systems to be able to organize those emotional responses. But I think at the core, we really are beings that are meant to experience joy and wonder and astonishment. And those things are the reasons that we collect all the other information.
2 from Alan Turing in the 50s. 1, is thinking a function of the soul?
I'm not really sure I know how I'd answer that. Is thinking a function of the soul? I just don't think you can separate it out. And I don't think you could separate emotions out from the soul either. I think that the deeper spirit that's engaged in each human life requires both. As I said before, I don't think that they're separable or that one gets to have a privileged place over the other. I think that they're so naturally a part of the way that we express spirit as human beings in our lifetimes, that I don't know that I would say you could separate it.
Yeah, I agree. Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? It's like people meditate, go, okay, now think about not thinking. And
I know.
there's a bumper sticker on a car on my street. It says, don't believe everything you think. And I said, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Exactly. It's our relationship to those thoughts that's the part of meditation that's so interesting, right? Like we have to be in new relationship with those parts of ourselves that want to overthink, underthink, privilege thinking, overfeel, underfeel, privilege feeling. It's about knowing that those it's I had a wonderful teacher when I was in college who taught it was a microbiology professor, but he was also someone who had been deeply changed by his relationship to meditation. I don't have that kind of practice, but he did. And he said these really wonderful things. He would make us all, a lecture hall of 800 students would meditate for 10 minutes at the beginning of every class on the microbiology of cancer and AIDS. And he said this image that I constantly think about, which is, drugs will stop the train that's running in front of your face while you're trying to concentrate and allow you to see between the cars. Meditation will slow it down so that you can actually see what's on the other side through those gaps, through those brief gaps. And any kind of practice that allows me to remember that there is a river of information or clouds in the sky, whatever metaphor one needs to be able to see that, these things, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotional responses to things, history, the moment that we're in, they're transitory and they're temporary. And they're transitory and temporary, I think, even within the soul and the spirit.
So well put. McLuhan said, the gap is where the action is.
Yes, the gap is where the action is.
That in betweenness, the trains, that's where
it's in that moment where you can see the other side and you're like, oh, there's a mountain range over there. There's another country. What is it on the other side of that train? It was a brilliant experience being in his class and life-changing.
So cool. Thank you. So the second Turing question is, can machines think?
Well, I think machines can think as machines think.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need to be able to try to understand them as human thought.
Yeah.
But I think we are training them to have a mode of thinking.
Yeah.
It's just not necessarily ours.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning.
Yeah.
Always more pursue meaning.
I got it. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, just to follow up, is because meaning tends to last, happiness doesn't tend to last.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I don't think that happiness, I think that, obviously we're in a culture that really privileges it and makes it feel as if we're failing somehow if we don't experience happiness at every juncture. And I think that's a trap. I think that happiness is transitory, joy is transitory, awakening is transitory, astonishment is transitory, sorrow is transitory. And I think the more that we get attached to the idea that we need this we need to prove ourselves with a perfect state of being of any one of those, that we lose the idea that actually the meaning is made up of all of those experiences. Every one of those things contributes to the meaning we make out of our lives.
You're really comprehensive. It reminds me of Pascal saying, in order to understand anything, you have to know this end of the spectrum and that end and everything in between. Good luck. So, Eiren, does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Gosh, that's such a good question. And I feel like because my work really puts me in conversation constantly with scientists, and that, I really understand from that work that I'm not an expert when I'm not an expert, that I feel like I'm going to have to punt that question, because for me, I would want to go and speak to somebody who was more familiar with neurology and neurobiology and just the mechanisms of how the brain actually functions. I think that's a different question from the soul or the spirit, and one that I really don't feel qualified to answer.
Well, this is really good because I want to tell you, it's like me and you versus the wording on the questions.
Oh yeah.
And I'm for people to say, I don't know, or I can't answer that.
Yeah.
Rebecca Solnit has a great line. Just because you ask me a question doesn't mean I have to answer that. I'm not even after an answer.
No,
These
it's the process
just
of asking the question. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think part of what's interesting about it being asked that question is recognizing what emerges in you when you're asked a question like that. And what emerges in me in that moment is, I want to take that question and go ask a scientist, which is actually a big part of the way that I work, which is I don't know why I feel awe in this moment or feel wonder in the face of a particular experience. Let's see if a scientist has a good idea about how that works. And I think that's where I go, is like, the question is fascinating because, there's somebody who has done some work around this.
Yeah, George Lakoff just put out his book, The Neural Mind. It's like, oh my God. But it is like, I want people to feel comfortable that they can say, I don't know, or I can. But see, I like people changing the wording, and I like to punt. That instead of saying I pass, you said I'll punt.
Somebody's going to catch that question. That's the thing. It's a great question, and someone out there is ready to catch it.
Boom. And so, like, I'm for tangents, anecdotes, stories. So I do encourage that. Great. So here's another one in that regard, maybe.
Okay.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I have no idea, scientifically speaking. And B, it also makes me think about the fact that one of the things that comes back to me all the time when I'm working is this idea that's a quote from John Steinbeck about how in order to really be a great thinker, you have to be able to look from the tide pool to the stars and back again, to be able to understand scale in that way. And I think your question really gets at that question of scale, right? There is the universe entire, which is dwarfing of us in its enormity and humbling. And we have a relationship to scale where that's just so much larger than our consciousness that we can't really take it in. And then we have the tide pool where everything is smaller than we are, and it looks very explicable. And I think that for me, as a thinker, as a writer, as a person, one of the things that I'm constantly trying to do, and I also think this is true in terms of like when we're encountering something as enormous as climate change, which I obviously work on a lot, the important thing to be able to do is build that muscle that allows us to go from the tide pool to the stars, right? So that we're dealing with the question of enormity by practicing experiencing it. Experiencing the speed of sound, right? Or the speed of light, and then going back to experience the speed of thought. That kind of musculature that we can build up as human beings, that wisdom traditions have been working to help us build up for our entire history, is, I think, the more important thing. Like, I'm not sure which one is faster, but I think I want to be curious about which scale I need to be in to address a particular problem. And I want to be able to build up that muscle that allows me to move back and forth between scales like that.
Really aspiring. Your words are great. I appreciate this. Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house
With the
using
master's
tools."
tools. Yeah.
And Yvonne Rainer, her colleague, said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools." What
Hmm.
tool do you suggest?
What tool do I suggest?
What new tool? Yeah.
Oh, new tool. Um, I think it actually would be what I just finished describing, which is I think that the tool that I want to suggest to people is that muscle within ourselves to
Yeah.
be able to move from the macro to the micro and back again. Because I think
Yeah.
that right now, what we're coping with in terms of what the master's house is at this point is a requirement that we believe that things that are larger than ourselves are impossible to affect or change. And that's fascism, but that's also something like climate change or genocide, that it's so big that we can't, as individual people, possibly have any power over it. And I think there's been decades and decades of work on shaming the individual for feeling disempowered, especially around climate collapse, right? You know, if it's you personally don't recycle properly, so therefore you are the problem, therefore you
Yeah.
cannot as a single human life address this larger issue. And I think that what I have tried to do with my students and my kid and my own consciousness is to try to train myself to be able to recognize that that enormity is there and it can be overwhelming. But if we can manage our relationship to it and not feel disempowered by it, feel strong in the face of something so large, then we can go back to our own human life and find what power we do have. And it's that, you know, these huge systems that require us to think of ourselves as powerless. That's the tool that I really think we need to be building up. And it's an internal one. It's a tool of fortitude in the face of that huge question of scale that, you know what, I'm not necessarily a fan, but Timothy Morton describes as a hyper object, right? Like these things that are so much larger that we think that we can't actually have any impact on them or control over them.
Yeah, it reminded me of studying media ecology with McLuhan, is that the word ecology is about organism's relationship with his environment, with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it means a lot. So since I asked this tool question so often, someone said, "Well, what about a toy? What toy do you gravitate to?"
What toy? I'm very bad at play, except that I really like a child's bucket.
Oh, wow.
Because a child's bucket is a way to encounter the environment, right? You could use it to carry around a mouse or a pet or a kitten, but you could also use it to go and investigate the tide pool and to collect animals and to be able to then return them, to be able to collect them in their native water, to be able to put them back, to be able to affect tiny streamlets on a beach and make new water courses. There's so much creativity and play and encountering and kind of containment of the larger world in a kid's bucket. And some of my most formative memories of my forming my relationship to the power of my human life in relation to the ecosystem really centered around that. And also so did a lot of my parenting. So I think that my play has always been that kind of play, you know, play that is about my relationship to my more than human kin and the ecology around me. And so that's the one I would grab.
Well, it's like a magic carpet ride with you, because it's like I'm going to Cannery Row with Ed Ricketts with
Oh my
Eiren.
God. I love him so.
And then, you know, Eno just said recently, play is how children learn, art is how adults play.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. I do think of myself as someone who doesn't play, but then I spend, you know, 6 or 7 hours of my day making up people and having them do things on the page. So if that's not play, I'm not really sure what is. Music is play too.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I worry about the disempowerment that I think is being fed to us as a population. Just, and I'm not even talking about folks in the United States right now, which of course I think we're having a sort of spike in in our role as global disempowerment guinea pigs right now. But I think it's something that I worry about generally and globally, because our sense of not being able to make solidarity or justice or beloved communities, or to push back against oligarchies and billionaires that are toying with the planetary balance and telling us that there's nothing we can do about it. That disempowerment frightens me. And the sense of the way that disempowerment begins to erode connections between people and the building of community, I find really frightening. And so I sleep pretty well now. I did have to write a whole novel in order to be able to sleep properly, because I think I really needed to work through whether I thought it was possible for us. Like, again, back to this question of I don't know what I think until I write it down or until I process through writing. I didn't know that I thought that humans could push past that disempowerment towards the goal of making a future that we wanted, until I let myself tell a full story about a group of people trying to wrestle with that same question.
Wow. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions.
Yeah.
So I ask you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think because we're slow. We take time to be able to analyze our own experiences. And I think most of humanity doesn't have the privilege of being able to sit down for hours a day and process what they think about a thing, right? It's an incredible honor to be able to get to do that and put words out into the world that can help people assess and adjust to and cope with the way that human culture is unfolding. Most people have to process that through what they read, through what they consume in terms of media and books and films and music that help them process it. I think it's why I've always been drawn to reading science fiction writers. I don't think it's possible for me to quite understand what's coming until I read Octavia Butler or Ursula Le Guin. And when I read them, I have a little bit more information about what it is I'm feeling internally, because it takes time. It takes time to be given a shiny new toy like a cell phone and to think, is this better for me or worse? Right? I don't know until a couple of years into it. And then I've got an addiction to social media. And then I think, oh, that was a bad idea. And I think we're not great at being able to know how it's going to impact us years to decades down the road, what we're choosing that feels exciting and new. And so we need people to be able to push ahead for that, because we are slow, because there are other things on our minds. Our mothers are sick, or our children have to get to school. And so we need the privileged folks who've got the time to be able to parse it for us.
Yeah, it was like in the old days, if you watch TV, you're dumb. If you read books, you're smart. But when books first came out, it was like, oh, these are bad.
These are bad. It's wasting the minds of our youth. The women will all rebel if they read these novels.
But the other sci-fi thing I love is my friend said, well, what's the best era of sci-fi? The 20s, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s? And the answer is when you're a teenager. And yes. So it's almost like, in going back to music, what makes the biggest impact on you in your life is when you're a teen, or it makes a big impact on you. Is when you're a teen, you read that, Stranger from a Strange Land or whatever. And it goes, whoa.
Yep.
So do artists have moral obligation?
Yes, I do. I do think we do have a moral obligation. I think that we have a duty to make people freer, make people more open. And I think we have a moral obligation to be able to do that in a way that corresponds to human liberation and justice.
Really good. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of any ideas.
Good, yeah.
I don't think that I think that one of the great things about growing up in the generation that I did, with the parents that I did, was that, I think there was a real emphasis in my household. And my parents were old bohos, right? My mother cooked at Alice's restaurant. I grew up in the kitchen there. Like,
Yeah.
this is a group of people that, my aunt was one of the people trying to levitate the Pentagon back in the day. And so my father also was a person who made shaker furniture and was really obsessed with utopian movements, and had a huge library of books about utopias, and how they work and how they don't, and what fails and what succeeds, and what information and ideas are necessary. And I know that because I'm, third or fourth generation bohemian, depending on how you count it, that's a community that's always trying to find a possible relationship to how we carry that history that tends to get kind of memory hold, right? Like, it's not mainstream, so there tends to be this sort of torch passing of, like, here's what the last generation said about liberation, about how to be free, about your moral responsibility, about the ideas that we're fighting against or fighting for in the period when we are trying to practice liberative art making. And I think because of that, no idea ever felt frightening to me. It felt like something I needed to understand. It needed to be put in context. But, I was the kind of student who was writing about eugenics movements when I was in my early 20s, because I wanted to know what happened to people like myself and my family who had genetics that were non-preferable, and how people responded to fight back against it. Because to my mind, and from what I sort of was raised in, those ideas never go away. They ebb and flow, they surface, and they're defeated. There's a constant battle. The moral arc of the universe may bend towards justice, but I think that it's very much at a sine wave doing that bending, and that we are always going to confront the ideas that were trying to sap human flourishing from periods before. And so we need to know what they are. And I think being afraid of them makes them more powerful, older or newer ideas.
Yeah, you evoked that word. Zappa didn't invent it, but he used it. Wavicle. It's a wave and a particle.
Oh, I like that. I didn't know that one.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Yeah, I have very idyllic early memories. My earliest memories are from when I want to say I was probably 2 or 3. My parents rented an old white farmhouse on a dirt road in the middle of the Berkshire Hills in Western Massachusetts. And my father used the scythe that was in the barn to cut the grass in the back of the property. And I remember sitting on a porch in a late afternoon sunshine watching him scythe the grass. And I remember being underneath a big maple grove in the rain while my parents made maple syrup in a big boiling pan, and walking down barefoot down the dirt road in the summer when there were huge ferns everywhere. So there are all these little snippets of memory of kind of a very Yankee relationship to the natural world, right?
Yeah.
Very much like, we're in a tame place. It's safe for you to be here. Here's this long tradition in this place that has a deep and complicated history, but you're in golden hour light, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Like, those are the early coming to consciousness memories that I have. It was all from that beautiful place.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, it's always a blessing.
You are great.
It's always a blessing.
I love it.
Oh my gosh, we need it. I mean, and in fact, I think it's one of the most important things that we have as human beings, is that even the dark things are there for us, as teaching tools, as information, as something we have to be open to. We shouldn't ever not think of them as a blessing. What an amazing thing. Can you imagine not being able to remember anything? I mean, you'd be very much in the present moment, and I'm sure it's got its own advantages, but what a loss.
Yeah.
Oh,
Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
I mean, every one of them. The one that comes to mind first is my kid, who has been the most incredible teacher that I've ever had. I think it's it's debatable whether my father was more of an impact in terms of setting me off on a particular path, but having my kid was both really a way of pushing back against a narrative about the genetic kidney disease that I inherited. When I was 26, I went to go see a nephrologist to talk about my condition, and he asked me if I wanted to have children, and I said yes. And he said to me, I know how to end your disease in 1 generation. And I said, how? And he said, people like you should never have children. Um, Doing a very good job of echoing a eugenicist argument that has been going on for, decades before that moment in my life. Having my kid, making the decision to have a child, a biological child, and giving birth, going through that process, having it be healthy, joyful, wonderful, and having this human being come into my life who is, I think, one of my best teachers. I mean, this is a kid who has always had, much like I did when I was little, a preternatural relationship to the natural world and to observation and to language and to processing the world through both that kind of awe and joy in relation to what's in front of him, and also this deeper experience of figuring out how to communicate that, how to bring that joy into being through language and art. And because we're so similar in that way, and my childhood was wonderful and idyllic in many ways, but also very fraught with a lot of pain and trauma, it was one of those things that I think, you see, this phrase comes up a lot with people who are on healing journeys of one kind or another, which is when you've kind of healed your own trauma and your own wounds, it gets to echo back over generations. And I feel like watching my kid come into being in this world and begin to form and become who he's meant to be has healed an enormous amount of my own childhood. And I feel like it does echo back over generations. There's a clarity that comes from watching someone emerge into their full self from the moment that they arrive on the planet that has absolutely been formative for me. It's made me a braver person and a better writer and a better thinker and a better feeler of the world. And it's also enhanced every other intimacy that I have, because there's a real grace to being told that no more of your line and your genetics should exist, and pushing back against that to watch that product of this line of people absolutely move into the world and thrive.
Wow, you really painted a clear picture there. I appreciate that. And the same question, Eiren, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was the impact?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's going to take me a minute to think through the people who've had an impact on me. There's a friend of my dad's who, oh, hi, who's the second mother to me, really. She knew my dad since college. So they had known each other a long time. She was married to one of my dad's best friends, and her name is Mary. When my father was really, really ill, for the first time, I was in my late 20s, and my dad was divorced from my mom. And so I'm an only child, and I was kind of on my own coping with this massive crisis in the family. And she welcomed me into her house and took care of me during the worst period of that crisis, and really nurtured me and mothered me in a way that I hadn't really been mothered by my own family. And it gave me both a sense of what it looked like to truly be cared for by someone who had the capacity to recognize my crisis and address it and still be in relationship with me in a really boundaried, comfortable, safe, healthy way, but really hold me up through a period that was really difficult. And it was a conversation with her when my dad was ill, where she asked me, and again, this is years after that conversation with the doctor, if I wanted to have kids. And I said, yes, I thought so, but I really wasn't sure, because was it fair to a child to bring them into this genetic legacy? And she said, essentially, I think you know that you want children and that you would never say that your father's life or your life wasn't worth having.
Yeah.
And it changed my understanding from that point forward. I was like, right, that actually is a way to acknowledge that I believe in the sacredness of my own experience and my own life and my own right to being alive and my father's right to being alive, and that even people who are disabled or ill are not do not have to forego the joys and complexities of what they want in life just because of their illness. And I think that changed everything. I feel like not only the decision to have children was affected by that, but I also think it made me more likely to pursue the writing that I do now, to be more serious about the music I was doing at the time, to kind of look for and insist on a strong and stable relationship. It was a permission structure that no one had given me up to that point, to have joy, even though I was a person with this broken genetics. And no one had put it as simply as that to me before that moment. I don't think the course of my life would have been the same if I hadn't had her influence.
Really wise words. That's beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
They raised me as an agnostic, and I really value that decision on their part. Both of them had come from wisdom traditions in the Christian side of things. My father was raised Catholic. My mother was from a long line of Episcopalian, actually ministers and bishops, and she was raised a bit in the Episcopal Church. But both of them had kind of left their religious practices by the time I was born. And while my father was obsessed with these Christian wisdom traditions and utopias like the Shakers, neither of them practiced any religion when I was growing up. My mother eventually found Buddhism. My father passed away as an agnostic. But they explained what agnosticism was to me from a very young age and said, both of us believe that there is a God, but we're just not sure that we've chosen a religion that we feel is the wisdom tradition that would fit our concepts of it. And so they told me, you can go to any services in any church that you want to at any time, and we'll take you and we'll help you explore whatever wisdom tradition calls out to you. And so in my childhood, I went to lots of places. I went to congregational churches and Catholic churches. I went to Quaker services. I went to Jewish services. I went to, Buddhist meditation spaces, all the way through. And I feel like that has made me a very curious person about spirituality, and very grateful to have been exposed to lots of different wisdom traditions. I haven't found the wisdom tradition that speaks to me personally to form a deep relationship to a particular set of structures, but I see how incredibly lovely that is. And I also see that for me, I'm not sure. I think there may be one that calls out to me eventually, but I also feel very open and comfortable with agnosticism and this basic belief that they instilled in me, that all wisdom traditions are equally approaching the question from the same space. And so it's really about, does the set of traditions feel like it speaks to your day-to-day life, to the, the strictures that you're going to be engaging in, to the discipline that you want to take on. And I've loved every encounter that I've had in spiritual traditions. My husband is converting to Judaism right now after being Presbyterian as a child. So I'm getting to watch that unfold in real time. We're going to services tonight. And I have done a ton of retreat work. When I need a writing retreat, I often go to monasteries or priories that have spaces for people to come and meditate and work quietly alongside the folks who are in devotion. I also teach a lot of spiritual texts. And when I was writing my memoir, my agent said to me, this is a stealth spiritual autobiography. I don't know that it's very stealth, actually, but I think
Huh?
it's very much an agnostic's book.
Do you pray?
I do.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Oh, I think just welcome. I
Yeah.
think I just want to be welcome to the next plane, whatever it is.
Yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think evil uses people as a vehicle.
Yeah. It's really the hidden question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set up.
Yeah.
Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Mm.
Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I don't think that's true. I think that you have to acknowledge the humanity and the existence of other people, even if you feel like what they're engaged in is evil.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can, I think dehumanization is a trap that evil invites us into. And
Yeah.
so if you want to be in relation to pushing back against evil, you have to avoid that trap as much as you possibly can. But I also think I say this more than I mean to in my own head. Do no harm, but take no shit. Right. I don't think that there's, I think that in the moments in my own life when I've been encountered people who are harming me, it is very important to me to continue to remember their humanity, to be able to, in most cases, leave the door open for their possible transformation. But also to be very clear about when you're too close, when there's too much harm, when you need to regroup and husband your own energies in the face of the harm that's being done to you. And I think I don't think I would be able to come up with a prescription for everyone to use in relationship to their enemies, right? Because I think it depends a lot on where you sit in relation to your own privilege and power versus evil. Because the prescription that would work for me as a middle class, middle-aged white woman who publishes books is very different than my neighbor down the street who could be vulnerable to ICE. Like, we have to have different relationships to our enemies because of the situational nature of the way evil manipulates people.
What's similar to this, Nassim Taleb said games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Gregory Bateson says if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff? Or does he go, oh, I did something socially and morally wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. You can go wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
You know, I think I want to go back to the first part of that prompt, which I really love, which is this idea of like, we don't know who the heroes are.
Yeah.
Because I'm really fascinated by this idea, and I think about it all the time. It's a Jewish mystical tradition that there are 36 people that are holding together the fabric of the world.
Yeah.
Right. It's part of the Kabbalah, I think. And if I've gotten that wrong, I apologize. But I love that idea of the 36 because the 36 don't know they're one of the 36, and we don't know who they are. And I think that that's actually a more accurate representation of what heroism looks like.
Yeah.
Planetarily, right? I think that there are people who are holding together the fabric of space and time and justice and goodness on the earth, and they may not always be in that role. Like that role passes between people, to my mind, and I don't think it's something that you're even aware of in the moment, or we could really see from the outside necessarily, because there's so much complicated, brilliant, subterranean spiritual work that goes on in terms of holding things together, and it gets missed so frequently from outside observers. So I think that I'm much more in the camp of we're not really sure who they are, and they may not also be sure who they are, and that I think that we have to you know, I don't live like I'm one of the 36, but I don't not live like I'm one of the 36. Do you know what I mean? I feel
Well,
like
yeah,
my job every day is to think, what am I doing here and now that helps hold together the fabric of human flourishing, right? And if I can do that with how I'm parenting or how I'm writing or what I say in public or the way that I teach, and then I feel like I've achieved what I need to in terms of my relationship to my human beingness in that moment. And if I'm effective or useful, or I've provided something that's eased someone's pain or made someone's life or day easier, then that that also gets to not be attached to any kind of ego relationship to heroism, right? That's just what we do. I mean, there's that sort of old school idea of like, what is my duty to my fellow human beings? And I think that's it, is that all of us trying to strive to live towards that without hope of reward or return or heroism as a thing that is granted to us. And I think wisdom traditions teach us how to do that and bear that burden in a beautiful way. And really do get it right a lot of the times. You know, so much of training within a wisdom tradition is how to act from moral responsibility and justice and kind of that heroism without expecting hope of return or reward. The best versions of our traditions inspire us to be able to figure out how to do that, how to live that way.
yeah, I really aspire to that, and I know these are working when I tear up, and that's what happened just now. When
Oh,
you're really a good listener, because I run these quick cute quotes before the question sometimes, and I overwhelm them, and then I just say, the question, and to go back to hear that Nassim Taleb quote was really.
yeah.
And what you explained reminded me of Being There, the movie
Oh,
Hal
I love
Ashby.
that.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's a great
but
movie.
he he doesn't know he is, but they all
They
claim he.
all do. Yeah, exactly. But
Right, but yeah, go ahead.
have you seen the movie Perfect Days?
No, but tell
Oh,
me about
please.
that.
Oh my God, it's so beautiful. It's Wim Wenders and it's
Oh yeah,
set in
no, I know
Japan.
all about it. Yeah, I
Oh
know
my
all
God,
about
it's so good. But there's someone who I feel like is, at least in that film, he's one of the
it.
36, right? He's holding up
Yeah,
something
yep,
essential in the world and he has no idea. And he's
yeah,
cleaning toilets all day.
yep,
It's a perfect movie and very much like Being There. Just one
yeah.
of these slow meditative invitations into the complexity of the quiet life, lived well, lived justly.
I got to entertain Wim Wenders when he first started. I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we had a great film series. And
Oh,
after talking to him, this is really early in his career,
yeah.
we nicknamed him One Wonders instead of Wim Wenders. Really, it's
Oh, that's
beautiful.
fantastic.
But that movie comes up so often in my podcast.
I'm
People,
sure it does
just
because I feel
it,
like it's exactly what you're trying to get at. It's that
yeah,
sort of
and it's
that.
funny because you have ESP, because that's the next question.
Oh yeah.
James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago, Volta,
Mm.
and he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I go outside and see a real tree?" And then Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism."
Hmm.
Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Oh, because I think we need to have spaces where our consciousness is elevated. And I
Yeah,
think whether we do that through religion or through artworks or fiction or, film, I think that we need that space that's meditative, that's a almost like a trance state that we're all agreeing to enter into together. Hopefully, we get to do it more in the public sphere collectively. I love a movie theater for this exact reason, because I feel like we're not as often any longer in spaces of emotional transcendence together in public. And I think I've been in enough spaces, especially my early years in smelly rock clubs in Chicago, where people were making, absolutely transcendent, beautiful music for 20 other people. Um, Getting to see those moments of elevation of the self and of the truth and of the present and of the moment into something so much larger. It's that reflection of its largeness that helps us be able to encounter the actual tree differently, right? I see the light in the forest differently, having seen Perfect Days, because Perfect Days is a film that's partially inspired by the light that filters through trees, right?
Yeah.
And is photographed and is encountered. And so it heightens and elevates an already intense emotional reaction to nature for me to have, to have the visuals of Days of Heaven play through my head when I'm walking through a wheat field. I experience the beauty of that wheat field. I'm not removed from it, but
Yeah.
I have a deeper relationship to it because I also have an artistic piece of information that I'm carrying around in order to play alongside the reality that I'm experiencing. We're dreamers. Humans
Yeah.
dream. And
Yeah.
I love that we are allowed to have these collective dreams that then we go back out into reality and reify and reimagine. It's such a privilege.
Yeah. Yeah, Harry Smith did a lecture. He learned from Bruno that the purpose of cinema was to put you to sleep. And I always follow it up with Yoko Ono says, if you dream a dream alone, it's a dream. If you dream a dream with other people, it's reality. So you're sitting in that movie theater with a bunch of people. You all believe that
Yes.
you experience this reality.
Yes. I mean, so my father was a cameraman before I was born. My mother was an actor and my father was a cameraman. And actually, he was a cameraman on a Yoko Ono movie. So it's interesting that you bring her up.
Wow.
And so one of the first things that he ever gave me was one of his old single lens reflex cameras from his days in photography. And I was raised in a household where because my parents had both been in the film business, films were really elevated. We went to the movies. It was a really important part of our experience together. And I went to film school for my first year of college, thinking that I was going to write films. And I do. I mean, I wrote a short film with my collaborator that came out about 5 or 6 years ago. We're working on a script right now. I still think that it's one of the most important experiences that I get to have because I think, the art forms that I do, being a musician is creating an emotional experience for the people who are going to encounter your music. And when you do it live, you have to be the column of light that takes the divine and moves it into that space and then distributes it around, right? That's your job. And when you go as an audience member to see that, you're absorbing that information and experience. When you are engaging in film and you get to go as an audience member, you're getting to see not only that moment, but actually, because it's a projected thing that's not happening live, there isn't a live human being on stage. The collective emotional life of the people who are watching the film is actually one of the most important valences in that room, is the way that we feel as it moves. And I don't think there's many other places where you get to do that. I mean, as a writer, I don't know what people are feeling when they read my book, right?
Yeah.
They're off by themselves having whatever experience, and it's almost impossible for them to convey, even when they see me, what the experience of reading my book was like. Even if they send me a fan letter, even if they meet me at a reading. Being able to be in that dark room with that dream on the screen, right? And being able to have that collective emotional experience where we all feel similar things at similar moments is just an incredibly unique and special kind of art making. I really value it.
Really well put. And, I wanted to recommend to people to watch your Lisa Ellison interview on YouTube, because you kind of covered the next question I was going to ask, which is sort of your tipping points of being an author, a musician, an educator, and where your history there. But let's just cut to the chase and go to this one, because you brought up screenwriting. A screenwriting teacher told me that a great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
I mean, I think part of the issue here is that your intention is only half of what the artwork is, right? It's a co-creative experience as a maker of things that are consumed by other people. You are bringing your intention to the audience, and then they're co-creating with you, with what they're hoping to get from it, what they experience, what they're bringing to the piece. But I don't think I believe Stanley Kubrick. Having studied his films, I think he's full of nonsense. I think that's something he said because he thought it sounded good. Because I think that you can't watch a Stanley Kubrick movie without absolutely being enthralled to his intention. And you know, I don't know why you would make art if you didn't have an intention behind it, right? Because I'm not writing polemic. I'm not trying to persuade when I engage in my artwork, but I am trying to bring as nakedly and as openly as possible my human experience to be handed over to someone else to care for or to combine with their human experience. And so my intention is that my artwork is something that connects me to someone else, that connects my story and my life and my thoughts about a particular subject to someone else's, so that we can make something together, so that we can make opinions, we can make movement forward, we can make an emotional change in the way that we respond to something. Those all feel deeply important, and I would not be making art if I didn't want that connection to be an intrinsic part of what I'm putting out into the world. And that's true as a teacher too. You walk into a classroom with an intention that you want a particular type of response and experience from your students. You want to be able to, at least this is for me when I'm teaching, I want to be able to make sure that the channel of openness that I'm asking for from the writing that I read is not cut off in the students I teach. Right. Yeah. So I want to keep that channel open, right? As Martha Graham said, and I want them to keep that channel open. And I want to facilitate a space where that sense of lack of permission or not good enough, or I don't really know what I'm doing, or maybe someone will say something negative, or maybe they won't understand, or how do I get my intention across, that those things peel back to the open heart of what it means to speak a truth about your life into a void, right? A movie theater, a record that somebody buys in a vinyl shop, or, in the thrift store that they find 20 years from now. It's that moment of that openness that should be the intention of every person who's making art. And then whatever other intentions are there too, but that openness that I need to tell you something. I need to tell you it this way. This is the only way I can do it. That is the impetus behind everything. And any artist who says they don't think you should see the intention, I think is mistaking intention for let them see the chalk lines that preceded the masterpiece. I'm not sure I need to see chalk lines, but I do see your intention when you make your work.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I love how you bust Kubrick, because he needs busting, but he is a great artist. I think what he was,
he's brilliant. I love his work.
But what I think he's of course I took the quote out of context. So the quote, it could have said something else. I don't remember, but it just adds for this prompt again well, and
I guess the other question is he getting at intention, or is he getting at, I totally respect that one of the things that he does so beautifully is that he does political work without it being polemical. Yeah. And I think, if that's part of what he's getting at, then I totally back him. You shouldn't feel like somebody is directing you. I mean, I say this to my students all the time, so I can say it here because my students are sick of hearing it. When we follow you as readers, we don't care what your answer to the question is that you're asking. We just want to watch you ask the question.
Wow, that is heavy, because, well, first of all, I want to say I think he was touching on ambiguity.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And maybe, he was somewhat saying, and you already said that. I don't want you to, it's what the symbolist got out of Poe. Yeah. That May said, don't paint the painting, paint the effect you want to have, the effect you want to have. But you've already answered this, but I have to ask it because it's the follow-up to the intention question. Is Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your book?
I mean, I'm thinking of a reader because I'm going to like, I mean, especially with my novel, I had about 15 people who were reading it serialized as I did the first draft. So I would finish it. I would finish a chapter about a month, just 3 weeks to a month. And then I would send it out. And so I had them in mind, but I think when I was actually writing the book, it wasn't for those specific 15 people.
Right.
It was for a version of myself, really. Like,
Right. Wow.
like if I were to find this book, some version of me were to find this book in a parallel universe, would this be a book that I would want to read, that I would be excited about, that would be one of those, I have so many books from my childhood and from my, as you said, those early days when you're first encountering art and you pick up Frankenstein, or you pick up Moby Dick, or you pick up Ray Bradbury, or Madeline Langell for me when I was a little kid. The moment that you read those books and you are astonished by what someone is capable of doing with that particular art form, and it changes you and it makes you into someone new, and you hold on to the people that you met. I mean, I think about Meg and Charles Wallace from, A Wrinkle in Time all the time. Still, I think about, Charlotte and Will, but like those are these
Yeah.
they're parts of a family that I carry with me. And I really, when I was writing, wanted to have my books land like that for someone, so that they felt accompanied. And it's a version of me because I don't know how to write to a different taste than my own. Right.
Amazing. That version of me is a great answer. And it reminds me of also, I worked for Frank Zappa for 10 years, and he would say, I write this music for myself and not other people. And if they like it, it's a bonus. And I'm like, I didn't say this direct to him, but I would say that's bullshit, because if you hit this note or these lyrics, kids will buy your records, and it will enable you to make more music.
Records. Right.
And he was over romanticizing that, and that's fine. Yeah, it's fine. But I think that's what he was saying. He was writing his music for a version of himself.
Yeah.
Well,
and the thing that's really great about, if you decide that that's what you're going to do, I mean, I'm not the mass market, right? My taste isn't I don't buy the things that end up being the most popular in the world. And a typical Gen X, right? Like, I love that some of the things that I found out about in the 90s that were personal obsessions, nobody ever really caught on to them, or then they did, but it was 20 or 30 years later. And then it felt like, okay, well, it was my secret thing that I loved. And now you've found it. I'm not saying I wanted to write that, but I wanted to write as if that was going to be fine. If nobody found it, if it didn't really land on anybody's doorstep for 20 years, if it was popular briefly and then forgotten and then it was rediscovered, would the people who were reading it be people like me who needed a certain reassurance about the way that they viewed the world and permission to feel joy and sorrow in a particular way, in the way that I do day to day? I wanted there to be one more piece of artwork that someone like me, and the other thing that would find and would feel encouraged by, empowered by, connected to, would feel less alone. And I also, and I can say this about the memoir specifically, I also was writing the memoir more than anything. I grew up in this family where everybody died young, right? So almost no one made it past 50 in my father's side of the family. And I have the same disease that killed all of them. So I anticipated having a shorter life than most. And I really wanted to be a mother, but I also knew like there was a possibility that I would die before my kid was able to really know me in the way that you can know somebody if you're 30 and they're 70. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't sure I would get to that point where I'd get to tell all the stories, or I would get to explain everything. And so writing the memoir was also, this is how I know your grandparents and I and further back and the rest of your family dealt with this issue and processed it and thought about it and moved forward with it. And if I can't tell you these things because I leave before I want to, you're going to have this and you're going to understand who I was. So it was both of those things. It was how do I write a book that if I found it, I would love? And then also, how do I write for a book that my kid might want to pick up off the shelf, not read right now. He doesn't have to read my work right now.
Right. It's amazing too, because your first word was open, to stay open. And this openness keeps reiterating in all that you say. Yeah. And the beauty is you've written great books, but also you've done a bunch of great podcasts. So your kid can go back and go, that's my mom, man.
That's my mom. There she is.
Telling me all this stuff. And you can't expect every artist or any artist to be good in every medium. Like when you film it, like I think you're a fan of like Terrence Malick. That dude doesn't explain any of his films.
No, he does not.
Maybe it's all the better that he doesn't want to talk about his films and he doesn't want to talk. But we want to speculate and analyze them, and that's fine. But it is, nowadays you're expected to, be able to talk, and not all. I don't want you to come on my podcast and read your book and tell me you're telling it through a different way so clearly, and really helps me go straight to these two questions. Here's the poet critic Helen Vendler, who just died last year. She says, I write to explain things to myself. Any comment on that?
I mean, I think that's brilliant and absolutely true. And I think, I got at this a little bit before, but I think, my mother was an EPA scientist and my father was obsessed with utopian communities. And when I was a young single mom with a disease that I was not sure I knew how to survive, and like a little, very special, perfect little kid to raise, my mother would do nothing but send me articles about global warming and ecological collapse and the cost of what we were doing to the planet. And I wasn't sure I understood how to be all of those things. Someone with a chronic illness, a parent of a really special child, a single mother, an artist in this moment in time when the most urgent thing in the world to me felt like trying to talk to people about what was happening to the globe and to the animals and the creatures and the plants on it. And in the face of all of that, in the face of not knowing how I was going to cope with the emotional toll that knowledge was taking on me, that witnessing was taking on me, that openness was taking on me, I only could understand what I thought, what I needed to do, what I understood by writing it down, by spending all of those nights, over 10 years writing both of these books to try and see what it was. Was I full of rage? Was I full of sorrow? Was I grieving? Was I mourning? Which thing was I doing in relationship to this moment on planet Earth? And I don't think if I had spent that time, I would really have understood it. I needed to write it down to know. Yeah.
And it's the other thing is just the utensil that you use, whether it's a pen or a keyboard. McLuhan said, everything we invent extends some humanness. He said human sensorium. So knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter and a camera projector extends our eyelid. Yeah. And then maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. What does the writing utensil, whether it's a keyboard or a pen, what humanness does it extend for you?
Oh, I mean, my desire to be in communication with other human beings. It's my voice, right? I mean, I don't write long form. I type, and very occasionally I'll write notes to myself, but I type, and I've gotten to the point now at this stage in my life where typing, even though I didn't really learn how to type properly, typing is an extension of my thought process and my voice and my language. And it is, a direct extension of my communication skills. It's what I would say out loud if I could. But it's faster to type.
There you go. And this is Milan Kundera. This is why I love writing, because the character that I'm writing about can go further than I can. I'm like, yeah, good luck. I take this pen, I write a character on that paper. How can that character on that paper go further than I can. Again, that sounds romantic, but any thoughts on that
Oh,
one?
I totally agree with him. And in two ways, I feel like that character can go farther than I can because I can put that character into situations I'll never experience and ask them to feel things that I don't really want to feel myself, and take
Yeah,
risks and move through the world and ask questions and answer them in a way that I can't necessarily do, right?
yeah,
As a person who's written both memoir and fiction, I feel like my characters in fiction have gone far beyond me and the experiences that they've had on the
yeah,
page. But then also that character can go far beyond me because I'll tell you, it's the weirdest thing because I've been working on this stuff. I think you can tell that like one of the most important things to me is that some part of my working life is basically as egoless as I can get it, right? As close to meditation as I can get it. I don't really want to be attached to
yeah,
accolades or relationships to, I'm not doing it for any of that, fame, money, whatever.
yeah,
I'm doing it and I'm trying to do it with as little ego as possible. And so I like to stay in a state of kind of underdogness in terms of like, will they ever
yeah,
let me publish again? And also surprise of like, oh, someone else has read it. So walking into spaces where I'm seeing my book on a table with a book club, for example, or a reading night at a local bookstore, multiple copies of something I made. I consciously understand that it's going out into the world and that thousands of copies exist and that it's in libraries and that it's being translated into Croatian or whatever. Like I know this consciously, but because I'm trying to stay in that state of surprise, it still shocks me that my character's name is in the mouths of people
yeah,
thousands of miles from me who I'll never meet.
yeah,
And so she's already gone further than I ever could. She's
yeah,
taken her ideas and her thoughts and experiences and placed them beyond my reach. And it's beyond my reach in time. Even if, the world were to end tomorrow, there would still be physical copies of my book that could be found in libraries. And that materiality of something that I've made and a character that now exists far beyond my reach is also a means of time traveling. I have no idea what will happen if somebody reads it long after I'm dead. If I'm lucky enough for people to read it long after I'm dead, it will exist in a time and place that has completely different meaning that I can't possibly know. So she's going on, she's going on out beyond my reach.
yeah,
There's a great phrase. It's from one of the polar explorers who said to his companions before he went out into the blizzard, I am just going out and I may be sometime.
yeah,
And I feel like that's what I think about when I think about that book going out into the world. I'm really not sure where she's going.
yeah. That's both Joyce and Zappa said all at onceness. It's all times are happening now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is, but you touched on something really important. No one's ever taken that Milan quote as well as you did. That
Really?
you really sussed it out, and that ego thing is a huge another question we might get to. But I wanted to follow it up with Steve Martin loves to quote David Mamet. Art is a product of the unconscious mind. Now, we've been going for 70 minutes, almost 80 minutes. I feel we both been at least 90% conscious.
Mm-hmm.
George Lakoff and the linguists and the neuroscientists say, oh, we operate 80% unconsciously or subconsciously. So then again, how to articulate an intention and not intention, your writing process. But this line, art is a product of the unconscious mind. I know some of that is applicable to what you're doing, especially when you talk about egoless. How do you process? How do you navigate that?
I mean, I think that I navigate it with some embarrassment, to be perfectly frank, because I think there's this thing that people ask me about the origins of the novel, for example, where they say, what was the inspiration, right? And I can tell a story about how, I thought about the idea because of growing up in New York and because of my godfather calling me during Hurricane Sandy and, my thinking about this and my work as a, ecological writer, blah, blah. Like all of that is true. But I also have said with some embarrassment in many interviews, she just sort of showed up one day.
Yeah.
And I've heard other writers say that before, and I always felt like, you're inventing something. And like,
Yeah.
I had that experience as a songwriter where I would just be like walking on the beach with my kid while, you know, he was playing in the sand, and I would get a tune, or I'd get a snippet of lyric, or I'd be drifting off to sleep and I'd wake up and there would be the beginning of a chorus. And I would, you know, I would know that it was floating through and I had captured it. And whether that's as Arlo Guthrie said, right? That, or was it Arlo Guthrie? I think it was Arlo Guthrie that said that there was things floating through the ether and you just sort of had to grab it. You had to be the person with the pen, and that Bob Dylan was the man with the pen, right? Like
Right.
That moment, I'm sorry if I'm misattributing the quote, but that idea of like these things are floating through the ether and we just sort of happen upon them and find them. I would not be surprised if that was the case, if there was some sort of universal miasmic like idea factory operating below my level of consciousness. But whatever it is coming through an unconscious mechanism. It's not something that I was in control of, that this character showed up and started talking to me. I couldn't have forced that to be the case for my creative life any more than I feel like I could have forced myself to find a melody line when I wanted one. It's not that I have to wait for inspiration. I have to practice every day, and then sometimes something wonderful comes through in that practice. Just like in spiritual practice, sometimes you get to touch the face of God, and that's not every Tuesday. That's because you've meditated every day for 20 years, right? But I think there is a huge component that is beyond my ken, beyond my understanding, and just sort of arrives, which doesn't. And I think that sometimes people, when they believe that, they think that takes the pressure off of them of, or that artists are all divinely inspired, or there isn't craft, or there isn't all this sort of mechanistic work behind it, because all of that's there. I'm a big believer in discipline and practice in order to be ready for revelation or for the unconscious to speak to you. But I think
that was good, because when you said I'm embarrassed, it's like, no, it's your openness. If you're open to it, in the golfer Gary Player said, the more you practice, the luckier you get. So that's amazing, because this is sort of the flip of that, Eiren. Igor Stravinsky says most people don't know what they like what they know. So, you know, we've been fed all this great literature, and we know I like Octavia Butler and Steinbeck. But this is what we've been fed. There's a million other people we haven't read that, you know, could, but they were the ones who got through to us on our bookshelves. But then Bertolt Brecht asked Charles Laughton, why do you act? He said, because people don't know what they are like, and I think I can show them. Now that sounds very much kind of, and you know, Laughton is probably one of the greatest actors ever, but we know he's sort of, did he know what he was doing? And I can show them. That's like a confidence. Or is that the opposite of your saying, I'm egoless? Maybe he was egoless, and he was saying, I know I can show them by being the vehicle. Who knows? But any thoughts on that? Because people don't know what they like, and I think I can show them.
I mean, that's such a great question. I think that, I mean, I do think it's true that we are obviously fed, you know, we're products of our time and place, what we've read, what's available to us, what we've been curious about. Our experience determines a lot of that. But I think that I think that your job as an artist and the calling of it is just like the calling for any other thing that you want to practice, right? Being a fantastic surgeon, or being an excellent golfer, or, you know, being a pilot. Like, there is a way in which something internal to you has to align with it's that thing of, you know, where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need, right? Like, I feel like what I am supposed to do is to place myself in the way of information, to figure out whether I believe it to be true, to process it through my own human experience, and then to make it available to other people so that they can decide whether it aligns with what they're experiencing or not. It is a channel, right? That's all that it is. It's a channel between me knowing a certain set of things or being handed a piece of information or a storyline or, a character, and feeling it resonate and vibrate and making it as true as possible within my own spirit and soul and beingness and brain, right? And then putting it out into the world so that then folks can respond. I don't think there's really any other job. It is, I'm going to show, I would never say I'm going to show them because I know what they're like and they don't.
Yeah.
I would say I think they know what they're like, right? I think people know what they feel, but I think that sometimes they don't feel the permission in that moment or the openness in that moment to being able to really sink into what they know, to what they're afraid of, to what they believe, to what they've been told, to what they're trying to understand. And that our job as writers is to have done that, to be willing to say, I have these questions and I'm going to answer them publicly to the best of my ability. And then I'm going to fail publicly to the best of my ability. And then you're going to decide your relationship to my understanding or my failure, to my answers or my lack thereof. And then I'm passing that on to you so that it lives in you and you can move forward. It's part of how I think we're in conversation, not just with our readers, but with the readers that could become the next writers that are back in conversation with us, right? It's that kind of sacred giving back and forth of detail and information and idea that is so essential to making art.
Really good. You just explained the etymology on the word jujitsu or judo is art and science gently. Like amazing, that push and pull. And I would love to do a part 2 with you because it's almost 90 minutes up, and we could get into art and science because I think you have such a background on that. And the thing you touched on identity is what I'd love to do in part 2 too, because Alan Watts says everybody's trying to figure out who they are. If you figure out who you are, you're fucked. We can define ourselves, and like you were saying, you didn't have to tell the audience what they need. Like the Igor Stravinsky is. Most people don't know what they like what they know. No, I think people kind of know that gut feeling that
it's when you play that note.
Yeah.
When you're on stage and you play that note that has that thing that vibrates in the center of your chest, and then you know that it's vibrating in the center of everybody's chest. And you know that they all needed to hear that note as much as you needed to play it.
Yeah. But let's close out with these two, because I've skipped over these two, and I kind of think they're touching on what our theme here was. Mike Kelly said, art is making your problems other people's problems. I'm glad you can laugh at that.
I love that.
Do you really? Why?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think it's very funny, and I think it's very sweet.
Yeah.
It really feels like one of those moments where somebody's like, hi, I have a mess. Would you also like my mess? Here's my mess.
Yeah.
And I love when artists do that.
Yeah.
I think it's so vulnerable, and it's so human, and it's so like an invitation for all of us to be a little bit messier together.
See, I like that in you, because people sometimes go, no, I don't agree, because they want to think the opposite. Art is making your joy other people's joy. There's nothing wrong with that. It's Hallmark.
That's great.
It's Hallmarky card, but we can do with both. Yeah. But here's the one that really gets me, that I don't know what it means, and I'm curious your thoughts. It's the poet Fanny Howe. The point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't.
Wow. I mean, I think both of these are really engaging with one of the things that I feel like my work is really dedicated towards, which is it is very messy and very painful to be a human being. And we are in the midst of, deep suffering all the time, even if it isn't our own.
Yeah.
And that is the nature of human existence. And art needs to be able to make a pathway so that we can figure out how to walk through that with as much grace as we can. But you kind of can't say that at the opening of every piece of art, that like now I'm going to
glad
walk
you
with
said
you through the darkness. Here we go. And so I think that's why I laughed at that, making your problem other people's problems. Like,
Yeah.
yes, to a certain extent, I made two of my problems, which is A, I have an incurable disease, and B, I'm very worried about climate change. Your problem also by writing these books.
Yeah.
But I feel like the invitational part of it, the part, and I feel like this is something that I really believe very deeply, is that like the kind of work I want to make is invitational literature. I want to invite people into a space where they feel that they are seen in what pain they are arriving with, and that pain is both pain but also a doorway to astonishment. And that, you know, my husband says that I need to make business cards that say "bad news delivered kindly," which I think is absolutely true. And I have said it in other places, and I will stand by that. And probably when I do get new business cards, I will put that on there because it feels so apt. Because I think being human is bad news. Like we come into the beauty of this embodied life, and we know we're going to lose it, right?
Yeah.
Or even if we don't know it as babies, everybody around us knows that we're going to lose it eventually, and we're going to be moved back into whatever plane we came from before. And the briefness and the specialness of being human is also the pain of being human. And so I think when we make artwork where we pretend that that isn't the case, you know, people can see through it. And I think the great things that people make, the things that endure, the things that resonate and that feel true, or that we carry around with us as like talismans or little like pieces that we need to hold on to, is art that does that holds both of those things simultaneously. And I'm a big fan of that. You know, I'm not going to try and paraphrase it because I'm going to butcher it, but in one of my essays, Rabbi Heschel talks about, I quote from his meditation on, like, it's, you know, of course this is a broken world, and it's painful, and it's full of loss and sadness, but it's also a wonder that we exist at all. And so I think the more that we write towards that, and I can't do anything else, so I'm only just encouraging other people to do it because that's what I like to read. But the more that we do that kind of work where we hold those simultaneous pains and joys in our hands while we're making whatever we make, the better, more resonant, more true, and kind of more long lasting our work is going to be.
Yeah. Really good, Eiren. This is like, I have these little themes, see art. So I have my on art page, but the one I just started recently is a whole folder.
Oh, that's juicy.
So
that's
we can do suffering next time, but I have to read you one. I don't even want you to react to it yet, but it is so applicable.
Okay.
It's Tom Waits.
Oh, God bless him.
It's both music and lit. Mm-hmm. I like beautiful melodies telling me terrible things. The world is a hellish place, and bad writing is destroying the quality of our suffering. Why isn't that? I mean, like, who says that suffering has quality? And you just laid it out. I mean, it is amazing.
Wow.
And I wanted to also ask you before we end, do you know that the end of Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, that the woman protagonist turns into a river and turns into the ocean? I mean, that I was like, this, you know, you're Irish, and I was like, this is so close to what I, you know, understood your book in talking about water. Let alone Molly Bloom's soliloquy at the end of Ulysses is one thing, but to have your character
turn into a river,
turn into water.
Yeah. I mean, it's deep in there, you know, like you don't even realize what your genetics bring along with them. But they definitely brought that.
But I'm going to hit the end broadcast button. I don't want to, because this is too fun and you're too cool for school, man. But I do want to plan a part 2, and it could be like 5-6 months down the line.
Great. I love it.
Really appreciate your time and energy.
I appreciate you too.
So enlightening. Thank you
so much for your time and your questions.
Yeah, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I do hope this never ends, and we could keep talking forever and ever. Thank you, Eiren.
Thank you.